Welcome, everyone, to another edition of SCRC's Let's Talk Caregiving. I'm your host, Roberto Velasquez, President and CEO of Southern Caregiver Resource Center. And I'm here, as always, with my co-host, Marta Rañón, our Executive Vice President. How you doing today, Marta?
I'm doing great, Roberto. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. Today's special guest is Peter Alo. Peter is a California licensed family service advisor in the funeral and cemetery industry. He has been in the industry for 5 years and specializes in pre-need arrangements for individuals and families. He also works closely with families who have had a recent passing, honoring their traditions, customs, and religious preferences. His joy is always to help families through the most difficult times in their life, showing them all the reverence and respect the industry can provide. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you for having me.
Peter, thank you so much for your time. And I am really looking forward to our conversation because recently I was talking to a group of caregivers who were very interested and had a lot of questions regarding how to prepare for the in eventuality, right? I mean, it's really something that caregivers often don't think about, and that's the pre-need arrangements, funeral arrangements, end of life decisions. And it seems very overwhelming, especially when you don't know where to begin. So I was hoping that maybe you can start us off with maybe next steps when a family caregiver finds themselves in this situation.
That's exactly what we come across. Most families, they're overwhelmed. There's been a passing many times, or even if there hasn't, they just don't know where to start. I mean, when you think about it, it's just another event, like trying to plan a wedding. So imagine all the decisions that it goes into a wedding, which again is broken down into two parts: the wedding reception and the wedding ceremony. Very similarly, a funeral is actually two parts. There's the funeral service, and then there's the burial. So what we try to do is explain all that, work out those details, anticipate questions they might not even know to ask, and just walk them through their own wishes, their own intents, as the introduction said, their own traditions, and just kind of guide them based on their wishes, making sure that they don't leave anything undecided to their family, to their children, and then do all that working within their budget.
I'm so glad that you put it in that way. And I know it's not, it's very much an opposing feeling and an event from a wedding. But the way that you put it into context, I think a lot of us understand everything that goes into planning a wedding or at least an event like that, right? All the details or the minutia and all of the people involved. And planning for a funeral, it's also very similar. I just never thought about it that way, but it's also preparing, especially if you're a caregiver, caring for someone with maybe a chronic disease, maybe they have been ill for a while. And so being able to say, okay, it's going that way. How do we prepare? How do we plan? Even mentally preparing for those moments. I think it's really helpful for a family caregiver. What do you think, Roberto?
Yeah, I think the preparing part is incredibly important. I know that if you don't have a plan, or what you call in the industry a pre-need, it is very emotional and complicated, and you don't know what if you have coverages like insurance policies that help cover the costs. It can be really expensive, and then you're very emotional, as we all know. And so you might be, oh, my mother wanted the most expensive roses and flowers, and the truth is she probably didn't want any. If you didn't have that conversation with them, and all of those kinds of things just kind of get jumbled up without the pre-planning and including the individual that you're making the plans for.
You're making me think of my own situation when I was caring for my great aunt, and she had already planned a lot of this. So it really took a lot of the burden off of me. However, it was the people that were left behind that now I had to coordinate, right? And those individuals had different wishes. And so it would have been helpful had these wishes been talked about or at least discussed beforehand so that there wouldn't have been this, I guess, infighting for a better, lack of better word. Do you find that a lot of caregivers sometimes there's also that added level of stress when they're coming in to make these decisions? And how do you guide them through that, Peter?
That's a great question. Essentially, what we try to do is offer as many options as possible. And then once someone pre needs with us, 90% of the heavy lifting has been done, many of the choices, all of the financials. And so nothing says you want something more than buying it. So if they've purchased it already, then literally we're just cleaning up some details, colors of the flowers, maybe casket choices, things like that. But when someone doesn't pre-plan, there's so much more to really wrap your mind around. Dad was very prudent, but now that he's passed, do we spend his money on him or do we continue to be prudent? I've been with families that had 11 children. 8 said that mom wanted to be cremated. 3 said that she hated fire. So these important decisions made by the loved one well in advance of ever needing them really, really helps, where the families can focus on each other while we take care of details.
That's wonderful to hear. I'm sure that's very helpful.
Yeah, to me, it just makes so much sense to try to make these arrangements and have these conversations. Do you ever help families, caregivers, especially, or just family members? Do you ever help them with that conversation? Like, how do you begin that conversation? Death and dying is already hard enough, and now you're picking out what dress they're going to wear or what outfit they're going to wear. I mean, that's a little on the extreme side, but yeah, you do get to those details and even what pictures and who do you what you want said. Do you want a mass or do you want just a service by clergy or no service, just a viewing? I mean, how do you prep and talk to families even about having this discussion if you do get that opportunity to talk to anybody?
Well, we provide all those options. And the great part about that is once they've started that dialogue with us, it's very easy for them to turn around and start having the same dialogue with their families, with their children, with their siblings, many times with their parents, because their parents haven't set anything up. So that's what we do. And the great part about doing it well in advance of actually needing it, it's done as a financial decision. It's done as a preference, not as an emotional, preparation. So the great part about doing it well in advance is that those conversations can be had, can be thought out, and really done with financial budget in mind.
Peter, how soon is too soon to start talking about these conversations?
I would simply say, as quickly as you feel comfortable financially and mentally to do it, and emotionally, you can't be too soon. I've met with families in their 30s because remember, if you're doing it that early, all you're really doing is rounding out your professional or your financial portfolio. So you know that you're trying to save up this money for retirement, for college, for kids, or for whatever that looks like. And all this is trying to manage the expense of something that is inevitable.
So, Peter, I was just a question. A lot of people that I've talked to will say, "Oh, I have an insurance policy. When I pass away, my wife is going to be the beneficiary and she can use that money to bury me or to handle my affairs when I'm deceased." But there's no plan. And is that how a lot of people view it? Is there different types of policies or insurance that people should look into when talking specifically about death and dying and burials and services and things of that nature? And if so, are they costly? How do people pay? Is it just installments? Is it like an annuity? I mean, how does those types of things work? Because I know it can be very expensive.
What I would say is there's a reason why it's called life insurance and not recently deceased insurance. Life insurance is for the living. That is an insurance that you use that money to pay off the house, to pay off the cars, because you may be even losing an income, to that household. That's what that insurance is for. A lot of people don't realize that many times insurance doesn't pay out what they feel that it should. Insurance companies, remember, they're there to make money, not pay out money. So many times it doesn't work out as planned. The other part about that too is even if it does, it takes 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months to get that check. No one, or rarely does anyone want to wait that long to basically place their loved one. So that's the other part about this. The third part about insurance is, let's say you do an insurance policy or even a death benefit, it doesn't slow down inflation. If you pre-plan with a funeral home, a cemetery, you've locked in whatever prices you paid that day. If you buy a life insurance policy, if it takes, if you pass away 20, 25, 30 years later, that's 25, 30 years that inflation has continued to move the prices of those goods and services up.
So you're basically locking in the prices at the time that you do that, including all the arrangements around it, like the flowers, whatever else you put into it. You're honoring whatever that price was at that time and still giving them the
Correct.
full service. It could be 15 years later, it could be 8 years later, it could be 20 years later, but those prices are locked in. That's really good to know. Wasn't aware of that.
Exactly. And so think of it. We live in one of the most expensive cities in the country right now, San Diego. And one of the primary drivers of that is land. So if you've locked in your plot at today's prices, imagine what 20, 30 years from now looks like when someone passes away. So that's the thing. The average inflationary rate on the funeral industry is 8.5%. Our property doubles about every 10 years. 20 years down the road, if you bought a $10,000 property now, it could potentially be $40,000 20 years from now. So that's the purpose of locking those prices in.
Personal story of mine. I remember when my dad passed away several years ago. He had a massive heart attack and then died just a few days later. He didn't have any arrangements other than he was a veteran. He was in the military when he was a young man. So that helped us a lot. But the planning, the organizing, my mom was still there, but she was, had lived with him for 50 years and it was just too emotional. So we had to step in and work with her. And it was very, very challenging, but it was so much easier in the planning of it, not emotionally, of course. When my mom passed away a few years ago as well, everything was already in place. She had with us and in encouraging with her to try to set these things up, she had put together a trust, she had to put together a living will, she had put together then advanced directives for her care when she was not able to make decisions anymore, and even help prearranged her funeral services and so forth. And for us, it was such a relief. Martha, you mentioned that with your great aunt. It was just such a relief because there's that burden that was taken off of us, all the kids, having to make decisions already now knowing what she wanted for herself.
Absolutely. I can't stress that enough. I really would hope that planning and talking about this, and I know it's not easy, and I know, and emotionally it's very difficult to have these types of conversations, but like Peter, you were saying, it's really the being prepared. It's a life event to consider planning ahead of time. When my aunt, and actually my uncle, passed away first, and then it was my aunt, and I was very involved in both situations. The difference was that I was a caregiver to my aunt, and so therefore a lot I needed to be responsible for. But for both of them, it made it so much easier knowing that it was just a matter of activating, right? So I went to the funeral home and it was like, okay, here's your file. Let's start this and let's open this and let's continue with this. And so it was really down to, like we said earlier, flowers and the reception, that I had to really plan for. It did make it so much easier. And I think about other individuals that I know who are caregivers, who I know don't have any of these plans in place, how difficult it's going to be for them, because nobody wants to talk about this, right? Nobody wants to talk about death and dying or funeral and these expenses, but it's inevitable, and it's going to be so much more difficult when there are emotions involved. I don't know what you think about that.
I definitely do. Think of it this way: if somebody passed away that you loved, would you go out and buy a car the next day? And the answer is
Mhm.
obviously no. You're so emotionally compromised by the event of the passing that large expenses are just brutal to think about, to plan, to navigate. And so that's why we like doing it well in advance. One thing that you touched on, Roberto, was the military. San Diego being a military town, I'd love for your caregivers to know that if they have a family member that is in the military, as long as they left the military honorably, they actually have a free plot at Miramar. They have a free
Mm.
headstone as well, regardless of where they happen to be placed. The only thing the military doesn't do is the funeral piece. So everything that kind of happens indoors, taking the loved one into their care, the casket, the preparation, the printed material, et cetera, et cetera. So they're already ahead of the game when it comes to taking care of half of the funeral slash burial. The burial piece is taken care of by the military, so they just need to find a funeral home. And we at Greenwood, we've got over 10,000 veterans placed in our cemetery because we're trusted to do that and to keep families together.
That's good to know.
I remember the services for both my parents because my mom received the same benefits as my dad when she passed away because of his service in the military. He was in the Air Force. The ceremony was very memorable, with the taps and the folding of the flag and all that stuff. And it's very emotional, very memorable, and it was a wonderful service. So I appreciate you bringing that up. I did want to ask you, though, I mean, the families that we're working with, the family caregivers, they're caring and supporting loved ones primarily with Alzheimer's disease. We help family caregivers from all kinds of across the spectrum: Parkinson's, stroke, heart disease, Huntington's disease, just all kinds of conditions that they might be caring for somebody with. But Alzheimer's, of course, is the most prevalent of all the diseases. About accounts for about 80% of all our clients. And what we also know about this disease is that after time, the person that they're caring for isn't able to help make decisions anymore, gets confused, so forth and so on. So it's really important, I think, for us to say this message is that once you have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, things like that, these are definitely topics you need to start talking about because at some point, that individual is not going to be able to give you good information possibly about what their desires are at end of life. So this, along with end of life planning, advanced directives, and then burial, funeral. What are those kinds of thoughts that people might need?
I
Jump
want
in.
to add to that is not to forget about the caregiver's decisions as well. I think here we have two considerations: one, the person that they are caring for, but also their own preparations. I think it's important to think about that. We often tell caregivers, if you're going to make a doctor appointment, make one for yourself as well. You're already there. But also because sometimes you, as going through this experience, you realize I want to make it easier for my loved ones when it is me on the other, end of this experience, that we also take into consideration our planning for the people that we leave behind. I think it's also important to consider.
Agreed, agreed. Because your caregivers are on the front line and they deal with this every day. It's important, like you said, for them not to forget themselves. And then, if by some chance they're asked by their client, the person they're giving the care to, they have a place to turn and guide them. And essentially, that's to me, so I can answer those questions.
Thank you for
Peter,
that.
I did have one last question I wanted to ask you because we're starting to wrap up, running out of time here. But when an individual purchases a pre-need or for the services for both you were saying the burial and the service, is there exclusionary criteria, things that they might not be able to get a pre-need, like if they have a diagnosis of cancer and they only have a few months left to live or something, is there something that would say that they cannot pre-purchase a policy?
Not not at all, actually. I've
Okay.
actually put pre-needs together for people that have literally passed away hours later. Many of our clients, they come to us once someone's in hospice. So whether they're still with us or even if they passed, we make arrangements accordingly. We do not turn people away for their condition.
Fantastic. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much for your time. I appreciate you being on here.
Well, that's all the time we have left for this edition of Let's Talk Caregiving. To hear more of our podcasts, follow us on your favorite podcasting platforms or visit our website at scrc.care. I want to thank Martha for co-hosting another important discussion, and Peter Alo for joining us today, and our audience for tuning in. If you're providing support to a loved one, you don't have to do this alone. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. To connect to our programs and services, visit our website at scrc.care or call us at 1-800-827-1008. If you live outside of San Diego and Imperial counties, visit caregivercalifornia.org and connect with the Caregiver Resource Center nearest you. To support our efforts and make a tax-deductible donation, please go to scrc.care and click on the Donate tab. And remember, SCRC is here for you, caring for those who care for others.